When I first realized that I had been a victim of child sexual abuse, I thought that healing physically would be the hardest part. And it was hard, but it wasn't the hardest. It wasn't even close. Hi, everybody. Kevin Barheit here. Thanks for tuning in. My recovery from child sexual abuse was threefold. I had to heal physically, mentally, and spiritually. But before any of the healing could begin, I had to realize that I'd actually been abused at all. Like a lot of victims of child sexual abuse, I was told that the behavior was normal. I was told by my abusers that I was special. I was 9 when I was first molested, and I was 15 when I was raped. And I didn't even realize that it had happened until many years later. About 2 years after I had actually gotten sober, I was working with a therapist. And we were working on some of the issues I was having with being intimate with people, with getting intimate in relationships, with having emotional and physical connections with other people. And as we were working through some of these issues, week after week, some of the same topics kept coming up. My promiscuity, my inability to have normal sexual, physical relationships. And one day at the end of our therapy, she asked me just point blank, she said, "Kevin, how old were you when you were first sexually abused?" I just stared at her and I just said, I was never abused. And she looked at me and she said, are you sure? And I said, no, I was never abused. I had never been abused. And in my mind, that was the truth. But all of the behaviors and all of the symptoms that I was coming to her with, that I wanted to work on and alleviate, and that I was struggling with in my life, were very similar symptoms that she had seen with people who had been abused. And so we ended that session, and then the next week I came back, and it was the same topics, the same symptoms, the same feelings, the same emotions, the same crying, and the same confusion. And towards the end, she asked again, she said, "Kevin, I know I asked you last week, but are you sure that you've never had any sexual abuse in your life? Because what I'm hearing from you are very symptomatic of a lot of the issues that people have when they've been abused." And I just racked my brains and I said, I can't remember anything. And she said, "Well, I don't want to pressure you, but think about it. And if you come up with anything, it might be very helpful for us to understand. I'm actually really pleased that you haven't been abused, but I'm somewhat surprised because it seems like this is typical of someone who has been abused." And I was a little bit unnerved by that, and it really kind of scared me a bit, but there was nothing in my brain, nothing in my mind, nothing in my memory that told me anything of what she was saying was true. Any of the questions that she was asking, I couldn't give her the answers that she wanted because they just hadn't happened. So I left the therapy and I put it out of my mind, and I went home and I had dinner and I got ready to go out to my 12-step meeting, and I was driving down a road I had gone down a million times. And I'm just driving along and I said, oh, here I am going over the thruway bridge. There we go. And now I'm coming up to the little S turn, and there over to the right is that silo, and over to the left, that's the house where I was molested. And I just stopped dead in my tracks, and I'm driving along and I thought, what was that? And it wasn't a white light that blinded me. It wasn't a moment that I panicked and drove off the road and burst into tears. It was just this quiet awareness. Something had happened in that house. I still couldn't connect it to what she was asking me, but something had happened in that house. The next week when I came to therapy, I sat with her and I said, "Barbara, when I was around 9 years old, I was in 4-H, and this leader took us into his bedroom, and then I explained to her what happened." And I looked at her and I said, "What was that?" And she said, "Kevin, you were molested." I said, "Oh." I said, "Barbara, when I was around 15 and I was down in the city on J Street, and these two guys took me in the room, and then this happened, and I explained to her the details, and she looked at me and she said, Kevin, you were gang raped." And I said, "Oh, okay, all right." And that was the beginning of me starting to understand what had happened. The work I did with Barbara started there, but it didn't go forward. At first it went backward. We had to rewind the tapes from where I was and the behaviors that were happening, and the angst I had, and the self-destructive nature that I had been living. We had to go backwards and understand how these pieces had gone unnoticed all these years, and how things had fallen into place one piece at a time from the age of 9 and the age of 15 and 16 and 17 and all the way into my 20s, when finally the awareness settled. Finally, there was some understanding. Finally, I realized I had been sexually abused. I had been raped. Because before the healing can begin, before the recovery can take hold, the curtains have to be pulled back. The curtains of denial, the curtains of lies, the curtains of shame. Over the next few weeks, each episode will shine a light on how to jump into the possibilities of healing from child sexual abuse, healing physically, healing mentally, and healing spiritually. Thanks everybody for taking time to watch the video. Make sure you like, make sure you share, make sure you subscribe. See you next week. Take care.